So this week I played around with my robot. I was trying to get, but I went out last week and tried to get um, points in my yard. So I just drove it around my yard. And number one, I want to verify it still works. I hadn't driven it for like a year. So I took it out there and I set up my cell phone to give me correction data. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I took it out and drove around the yard and measured. I got 2 points in the yard that I want to create a path for. So I got all that put together. And then I went out like the next day, maybe it was the same day. Anyway, I went back out and I had my stuff turned on. I was going to drive around the yard, and my correction data kept dropping out, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with that. So what I was doing, it was using my cell phone, and you can get I found this on the RG Simple website, although I don't think they created it, but they have a program that I can load on my phone that will connect to the internet and get correction data and then push it out the USB port. So I've got this, switch views, which you won't see it switch, but I'll go to speaker view. So anyway, I've got this little adapter cable here, this little 6-inch cable. It's got a USB-C on one end, and then it's just got a standard adapter for type A USB. And then at the other end of that, I just got it plugged into an FTDI adapter. So then I just took these jumper wires and plugged them into the GPS receiver, and that does give me a connection all the way through. And I can say configure it for the Department of Transportation website. If I set my cell phone to cell data instead of Wi-Fi, it will indeed connect. I go out in the yard, and then it just randomly disconnects on me. It gives me no explanation of why. I just look at it and says, "Oh, disconnected," and so I have no idea what's causing that. And I was saying I think I was saying this on Slack that maybe there's an update for it. Maybe if I run Wi-Fi instead of cell data, I could get it to do something. So I tried all that. I loaded the update, and apparently that didn't solve it. I tried just running I tried running my internal Wi-Fi instead of cell data, and it's still a couple of times it just disconnected with no explanation. So I think I'm just going to give up on that software because I think there's something wrong with it, or maybe it's something in my phone I got to reconfigure to keep it happy. I thought there might be a timer or something, but I haven't found that yet and decided to give up on that. So the other option is you can go with the on your cell phone, something called Lefebvre software. And some guy wrote up the same kind of ntrip client that runs on your phone and goes out on the internet just like this one does. But the only option for output it has is Bluetooth. So if you have a GPS receiver with Bluetooth, you can connect directly to it and talk to that. Well, mine doesn't have Bluetooth. And it turns out if you connect back in the old days, you could buy a module from SparkFun that said it was like a serial port transfer or serial port feed through. So basically, you put this Bluetooth module on, and one side looks like a serial port, and hook it up to anything you want. And the other side, it connects to Bluetooth and goes out to your device, whether it's a laptop or cell phone or whatever. And you connect, and you can just send data back and forth on it. And I was looking on Amazon for something, and I couldn't tell which module I actually wanted. And then I was digging through my box, and years ago, I put this together. This was a little module from SparkFun. So it's just I bought the module and glued it down to a piece of perf board, and then over here it's got pins on it that was wired up like the FTDI connector, I think is what they are. So anyway, I saw somewhere that's called an RN42 module. So I can look that up and find out, is it, I'm sure it was serial, and on Amazon, they have one that says serial and one that says bidirectional serial, and I'm not sure which one I want. So if I want to go down that path, I could. I should be able to hook up this module and get that to work. And then I could use the guy's software that I know actually works, because millions of people use that. And that would be a way to use my cell phone and drive around the yard and get my correction data. And since that wasn't working, I thought, what are my other options? Well, I had the telemetry radios that I was talking about before, and I was going to hook one of those up. So I got one that I plug into my laptop and run the RTKlib ntrip client, and then I put this on the robot and wired up. So I got it all put on, and the one on the robot would not work. It's got a little green light in here somewhere that comes on, and the light didn't come on. And I had these wires plugged into my GPS receiver, so I had 5 volts in ground and then transmit and receive data, and it just would not do anything. So I screwed around with that for hours, and then today I finally thought, that the pin that I'm plugged into on the GPS receiver says 5 volts in, And I just assumed any pin on there that said 5 volts, they're all connected together. But apparently there's a diode in between there. So what I did, I just grabbed one of these FTDI adapters and used it as a power supply. So I just hooked my device up to the 5 volts on this and ran it. And then the green light comes on. I thought, oh, I'm all set. I could see that the green light was on. I could see the two telemetry radios connected together. I could see the lights flashing, which meant it was doing something, but it still would not work. And then after a while, I thought, oh, since this looks like a USB 0 type port on my Linux, that means I have to specify a baud rate. So I set the baud rate to whatever I thought the other end should be. And then it still wasn't working. Oh, and I got to configure the radio. The radios. So I got 4 different places the baud rate has to be correct. So I'm down to the point where I think at this point, if I just go in to the radios and reconfigure those, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to pull up that RGU pilot configuration program. I realized, no, I don't have to do that. You can just hook it up to a terminal, and they got AT commands you can use. So I can say like AT, it's something. It was AT and another letter. It's not standard AT like you would have, and that talks to your radio you're plugged directly into. And if you want, you can put like ATS, and that talks to the remote radio. So I could actually tell the remote radio to go to the baud rate I want, and then go to the current one, tell it the baud rate I want, and then everybody should be happy at that point. So that's where I'm at with that right now. That I think if I just set the baud rates on those, it looks like the data is going through, and then hopefully I will have correction data, and they'll have to see if I just put the antenna. I could put my laptop and the transceiver, or the what do you call it, the telemetry radio, put those out in my car, and then as long as my laptop can hear the Wi-Fi inside the house, that'll give me a connection, and then I can just drive around and see what kind of range I get with that. And I just need enough to be able to drive around to the side of the house is all I really need. So that hopefully I can get around and try that today and verify that that's working. So what was the third option? Oh, then the third option is I've got inside of my robot right now, I've got one of these little it's a what do you call it, a ESP32 cam board. I don't know if you can read that on there. It says ESP32 cam. It'd be nice if there's a better way to get this to focus. But anyway, you can buy these on Amazon for like $10 a piece or something. And on the RGU Simple website, they say, oh, here's software to put on their module. And their module is just simply an ESP32 board or module soldered down to a board that plugs into the like XB connector that's already on there. So one time I just went out and bought one of these, wired it up to my board, and loaded their software on, and that works also. So this board will connect to your. It's got a little Wi-Fi antenna on it somewhere. So down at the end, it's got the little spiral. It's got a Wi-Fi antenna. So this will connect to whatever Wi-Fi you tell it. In fact, right there, I think that's an external antenna connector. But if I want to put an external antenna, I think there's a resistor I got to unsolder. It's just a little microscopic thing. Looks like a fly speck. You have to unsolder that and move it to use that external connector. So that one always did work because I was using that. And then on the robot, I got this cute little Wi-Fi hotspot. So it's like the little AT&T Verizon one, but this one you don't have to go through 6 different menu steps to get it to work. You just turn the power on and it automatically works. And it was working great until the company, when they shut down the 3G network, this thing quit working. And I tried to negotiate with the company, and they were just idiots. They had no idea what they were doing. And they kept saying, well, here, try this or try that. They knew that when they shut down 3G, all these stopped working. So I don't know why. Again, that's the whole thing about talking to idiots on the phone. So I just gave up on that. And that's why I'm trying to come up with different ways to get this to work. And if all else fails, I got a laptop on the robot, and it can connect to Wi-Fi, and I can just push data out its USB port and hook this FTDI thing back up. And that way, that would be a fourth option to get my correction data. So theoretically, if I just get all these things right, I can get my correction data back again. So back to my driving around, what I had done, I went through and created, I took my program that takes the heading from my static GPS. So I've got dual antenna GPS, and you can pull data off the second GPS, and it will say, this is your heading 0 to 360 degrees. And that comes out, I think people claim that's like a half a degree accuracy. So it's fairly accurate. And even when you come to a stop, it's stable. It keeps giving you a heading, whether you're moving or not. So that's why I wanted to use that. And what was the point of that? Oh, so I had a piece of software that take that and display it for me. But now I want to convert that into the actual ROS format. So I need to have it, instead of coming out in NED, northeast down format, which is standard for like a compass and a GPS, I'll use that format. But ROS decided to switch over to E and U, which is east, north, up format. And I'm still not sure why they did that, but they did. And it's got to be in that format, which means east is 0 degrees, and that it now, as you rotate counterclockwise, the number increases, whereas in NED 0 is up, and as you rotate clockwise, which I suppose your clock is since my screen is backwards, I suppose that's backwards. But anyway, yeah, the rotation is opposite, and east is 0 degrees, and it's putting out north is 0 degrees. So I have to fix that and then just convert it into radians. So that should have been what I needed. When I got all done, I went out, drove around and plotted that and thought, well, something's not working right there. So I need to play with that a little bit harder. And then I took one of the random GPS to odom.py programs, the one that Matt started with. And I thought if I fed in the latitude and longitude from the GPS, from the first GPS, and the static heading from the second GPS, that would give me an indication, tell me exactly where I'm at. And I'm not sure that's working right either. But since it got to the point where I couldn't get any correction data and my GPS kept doing stupid things to me, I finally gave up on that and decided to get the correction data fixed first. So that's basically where I'm at right now. As just before the meeting is when I got power on my radios and realized I have to go change the baud rate, because now I got to get the baud rate correct in 4 different places. I got to get it on the laptop. I got to get it on the transmitting telemetry radio, receiving telemetry radio, and on the GPS. All have to match all the way through. And I think it's, I know the one on the GPS is set to 50, what is it, 57,600, because that's what the phone was configured to, and that was working. So I set the one on the laptop to, and it still wasn't working, and I was baffled. And I realized, oh, now I got to go change it to both telemetry radios. So that's where I have to plug in a radio and fire up the AT commands and set the 2 baud rates. And then hopefully at that point it'll work, so that maybe by the end of the day I can get back to the point where I'm getting valid data, and then I can go analyze it and say, okay, is my heading right or wrong that's coming out of the second GPS? And I could also switch that back to my BNO 85, no, BNO 55 IMU puts out a heading that seems to be a fairly decent heading. So if I use that, as long as that's in the same format, then I can switch back and forth at will just by changing the, changing the name of the topic. So that's another thing I want to try and see what happens on that. And I did get to the point where I took it out in the yard and I was driving it around manually, drove up close to where my path starts. And with it just sitting there, I flipped the switch from manual to auto mode, and the steering just kind of just went, just jerked a little bit. I thought, okay, something, it's actually talking to it now. And so I flipped the switch up to ROS mode, and it started driving forward. Then it turned left. So it came up again, turned left, made a full turn, came this way, and then kind of turned the other way and went like that. And but the problem is heading for the street while I was doing that. So before it went out the street, I stopped the thing and thought, well, something's not working right. But it was actually that it was responding to the steering that Pure Pursuit was putting out. So that was a good thing. And while I was in hacking on the code, I switched it over. So my forward velocity is always controlled by my joystick, whether I'm in manual mode or ROS mode. So once I say, turn on Pure Pursuit, publish a path, and it starts controlling the steering, now I can run the joystick to control exactly how fast it's going, or just let it go back, let it come to a stop if I want to. And then at any time I can flip that ROS switch back to manual mode, and then it's taking everything from the joystick again. So that's essentially a pause mode at that point. But I ran it and enough stuff wasn't working that I decided I need to go back and get the correction data working. So that's where I'm at on that right now. I was trying to think. So I can't think of anything else on that. Okay. So any questions on that, or should we move on to someone else?
When you have time, writing down those AT commands for those radios, I think would be useful, because
Well, there is a page, if you go out to the, it was Arju pilot thing, and it says advanced configuration or something, and they have a whole page of those commands there that tell you what they are. So it's not a matter of writing it down, maybe just a matter of publishing a link in various places. But so yeah, and I played with those one time. They do work, and you don't have to fire up that other configuration software that they also will supply you if you want. It might be on this Windows laptop right here, but yes, sir.
Question. What are you using for RTK receivers and the antenna?
Well, for my receiver, I'm using that Arju Simple F9P. I think they call it the F9P Simple or something is what they call it. That's about a $200 board. And then the antenna, I went with the survey grade antenna, and those are around $100 a piece, maybe a little more. And depending where you buy it, you may or may not get a cable with it. So you might have to spend another $3 to $6 to get a cable. If you buy it from RG Simple, you get the antenna and a big long, like 10-meter cable, or I mean 6-meter cable. And so it does come with a cable on the thing. So that's what I'm using for the, so that right there, so each piece or each each unit cost me about $300 because the board was 200, approximately 200, and the antenna is approximately 100. And I think the price has probably gone up and all that, but essentially it's cost $300 for one unit. And since I foolishly bought a second unit just to try out this static heading stuff, that means I've got $600 into GPS now, which technically I shouldn't have to do that. And that's something else I once I get everything working, I can go back and experiment with that and see if I can figure out how to run it without the second antenna.
Okay.
And so on throttle control, is your throttle 100% manual, or do you have a switch where you can let ROS control both the steer angle and the throttle?
At the moment, I don't have a switch. I just went in the code. I just happen to have the code open. It's out here. Just slam the other value in there. So it just right now it forces it to always come directly from the joystick. And if I didn't do that, then theoretically, as I move my switch back and forth, yes, it will take the velocity from ROS if it's in the switches in that position. But since I had no idea what it was going to do, I didn't want to turn it loose and have it driving around and not know where it's going or anything. So I thought it'd just be easier if I put it so the joystick is always controlling it, regardless of what mode I'm in.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a good testing regime.
And if I wanted to, if I had extra switches available, I could put a switch on there that says either take the forward speed from ROS or take it from the joystick. So just have an override there that would let me do that without having to go recompile the code and download it again.
Yeah, good idea.
Oh, one more question, Jeff.
Yeah.
Why'd you decide to go with the MnDOT stuff rather than having your own base station?
I didn't want to have to buy another $300 setup to get a base station.
Oh, okay.
And the fact this other stuff is free, and usually it seems to work quite adequately.
Okay.
There's times when it doesn't work, it'll just quit, and then a couple of days later I'll put out an email, oh, I see our stuff is broken, or sometimes it'll just drop out for 30 seconds or something. But in general, it's rather than spending an extra $300 for something I don't need, that I just would rather go that way.
Okay. I'm looking at, well, MnDOT will work down here at Big Lake, but up north by the lake, cell phone coverage is rather spotty. So I don't know. I don't know which way to go right now.
Do you have internet connection up by your lake?
We can, although it's very weak. It's like maybe 1 bar.
You're talking about over your cell phone?
Yeah.
I mean, can you get installed into your house? Either the phone company or the cable company or whoever.
There is a cable running by the property. I don't know exactly what kind of cable. I'm praying for optic, but we'll see. I'll have to look into that when we go up. We're going back up in about 2 weeks, so I'll dig into that.
So the thing to consider is if you can get internet in your house, and then you can get Wi-Fi out in your yard. It depends how big an area you want to drive around. If you're just driving around your front yard, like I'm doing, you don't need you don't need a really good Wi-Fi to do that. But that's
Okay.
something to consider. So instead of using the cell phone data, because you can go either way, you can either get the internet over the cell phone or get the internet over an actual internet connection, and either one will work.
Okay, sounds good.
Jeff, didn't you show us one time the actual correction data that you had looked at? Like, I don't know, on a serial port or something?
I showed something when I hooked up the configuration software for the U-blocks, and I showed a screen that said, here it says these messages are coming in and the checksum is correct. And that's why I was so baffled this time. I hooked everything up and nothing would run. I thought, but I've had this working before. I know it works. And it yeah, I told you that the reason the radios weren't working because I hooked it up to the 5-volt input pin, not a 5-volt output pin. There's a place on the board that says 5-volt out. I just have to take the board off and solder a stake pin on there so I can wire that up. So, but yeah, I've had this working before, and it works. It pushes data through the radios and they work like they're supposed to. So it's just a matter of, getting right now, just getting the baud rate set, and I think I'll be all set on that.
Because I mean, just it was educational for me. I didn't realize this. There was only my recollection was like there were 4 sentences. It was all ASCII data, and it's a fairly simple.
Well, none of it is ASCII data. It's all binary data, so you can't read it. But this particular software is decoding those and saying it's a type like 1082 message or whatever they are. It tells you the message type, and then it might give you a little short description saying it's, what the definition of that is, and then it says if the checksum is correct or not. And I wasn't getting any checksum errors the whole time, so it seems at least what I was doing seemed quite reliable at the time.
Interesting.
I'm about to find out, if I take it out in the yard, find out, can I drive all the way into the block with this radio and try driving all the way around the block and see if it stays connected. So that'd be another interesting thing to try.
It's been a long time since I did it, but I think I started by just taking 2 Arduinos and hooking up those after configuring them in Ardu pilot software mission planner, hooking them up to the Arduino and just getting those two to talk and then adding components one at a time. But yeah, that was
And
yeah.
just a note for everybody watching, Al is basically using these same types of radios, like the same type of telemetry radio that he's hooked up to his. His is a ComNav is your GPS, is the brand of that.
Manufacturer, yeah.
But he's basically doing the same thing I am. He just has a different brand of, well, he built his own base station. So he's got a fancy GPS connected to a telemetry radio that sits out in his yard. And he's got a telemetry radio on the robot that pulls the data in. He's got a second ComNav GPS on there. So he's doing the same thing. He's just using different brand of GPS.
If you saw the Home Depot box that the base station is sitting in, you wouldn't, and how the antenna is mounted, you would not say, use the word fancy and anywhere around that. But anyway, you go right ahead. I think I'm set.
Al, could you describe more detail about your base station?
Let's see. I mean, it's 2 components. I think it's the GPS. Maybe it's just one component. Maybe it's just the GPS and the power cord to get it powered. Let's share my screen here. I don't think I actually have any documentation in my.
Yeah, I didn't see it in Miro.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got. Oh, fiddlesticks. Yeah, so that's something I need. Something I could add. Yeah, so I've got a plastic box with a power cord running to it, and inside of that box is a GPS unit, and so obviously there's 110 volt down to what the board wants, but the development board for this particular GPS, takes in a power cord, 12, a wall wart to get from 110 to 12 volt. 12 volts goes into the ComNav development board. The GPS unit actually plugs into the development board. One of the ports on the development board, there are 3 COM ports on the development board, all serial COM ports. One of those COM ports has got a TTL. If I get this wrong, Jeff, correct me, but it's got a TTL converter. The radio that Jeff just showed is connected to that TTL converter. It was previously configured to spit out correction sentences. That data is then coming over to the radio, like Jeff said, that's sitting on my tractor, ingesting that correction data, and then the magic happens to give it RTK fix.
Okay.
So the base
Thank-
station is really
Yep.
pretty mundane once you get it configured. And I've got notes on all that, but it's really dependent on this particular
Yeah.
Novatel knockoff GPS.
Okay. Thank you.
So probably if you go back through the index for these meetings, Al probably has spent several different meetings explaining all that and showing pictures of his thing. So right now I was just looking at the index to see what.
But all in all, that Ardu Simple GPS, I don't know how Jeff's performance is going to be when he gets near the house or under trees, but if it's that seems to be the right way to go cost wise.
Okay. So if I want more information, I just have to use a keyword search on the index to call up the different videos.
Yeah, you just search for whatever. And right now I made the mistake of typing in base, and that here it says wheelbase, and it's all kinds of things that say base. So I got to figure out. And it says it found 57 or no 37 entries, and I just have to dig through here to find out what those are. But base, and it brings up base link. So, and you can find the index by looking at any of the videos. Look down at the bottom; it'll say, "Here's the
Right.
here's the link out to the index." And if you can't
Yep.
find it there, then Al, did you have this back in the days of ROS agriculture? Did you do your base station there? So there's another whole 250 videos you can dig through there to. So I'm sure he's more than once shown his box and showed his board
Okay.
and his little adapter for the radio and all that stuff.
I'll do some digging.
Okay. So it didn't pop right up here because I say I searched for base and I don't know if I'd put base station or what I have to put. Here, let's do this. Let's search for ComNav.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend my configuration, Bob. I would start with whatever GPS you want to use, and more than likely it's going to have options on how to get the correction data out.
So I could start with the F9P.
If you can get your hands on a couple of those, you're in great shape from my perspective.
Okay.
And those you
Mhm.
can buy those from Arju Simple, or you get it from Spark Fun, and Drotech makes one. There's two or three more. There's probably a lot more available now that they've been out long enough that there's different ways to get it. But anything I've found so far, they want around $200 a piece for those, regardless of who you buy it from. But you can look around and see what you can find there.
Yeah.
And I've got the previous generation. I've got an M8T, and T means timing. And so in order to run that, you have to connect it to a laptop. They're running RTKlib. It has to do all kinds of fancy calculations. And that was a single band as opposed to dual band. And it would take like 3 minutes to lock on. And if you lost a signal, then it takes a long time to lock back on. The new ones just simply you turn them on, and usually it pops right in and says, "Oh, yep, I know right where I'm at." So, but the older ones you get them for $75 a piece, but then you had to have a laptop running the software that has about 1 million configuration options in it. And I don't know, if that's, I decided I'm not going to go back to that unless that little robot that I was building, I thought, well, I might put one on there just because I just wanted some kind of RTK GPS, and it doesn't have to be real fancy. So, and then depending what you're trying to do, if you don't need it really accurate, just get a, in fact, here's one that I just found this morning. This is this one's old enough. This is a single band, so it's L1 only, and it's GPS only. But you plug it in, and it does start spitting out data telling you where you're at. But something like this is no more accurate than your cell phone, so it might be plus or minus 3 feet or plus or minus 10 feet or something like that. But depending on what you're doing, that consider the thing. See if you got a farm and you're trying to drive from your barn out to a field somewhere. So you have to drive somewhere. You got a gate you got to go through. So you put in the coordinates of that. So that if this gets you in like 10 or 20 feet of the gate, and then have cameras or something that says there's the posts on the gate, you have to drive right through that and then switch back to your GPS again. So it knows that well enough. So, but if you're trying to say mow your yard and try to not mow off the flower bed, you need something more accurate than these really cheap ones.
Okay.
And the thing is, you just have to figure out what your application is and decide what can you get away with, or and then the other thing is how much money do you want to spend, and that's the problem, that it starts getting expensive when you're trying to get stuff that's the more accurate it is. Because you can get another one from RG Simple that's got, I think it's a Septentrino chipset, and it's like a fraction of a centimeter accurate on that one, but they want $700 to $1,000 or something for that one. So I'm past the point of trying to chase all this stuff and find the hottest technology, and the ones I've got seem to work for what I'm doing. So I'm pretty happy with what I have for the moment. In the next couple of days, I might change my mind on that, but I think, I was able to drive around the block using my cell modem hotspot and feed the data in, and everybody was quite happy doing that. So. It looks like Al's posting something again.
Bob, did you want to talk about that article?
Oh, the mower bot article. I think he reached a conclusion that he had two different RTKs. One was less, and he was trying to blend the two to get a good solid. So I'm thinking the reason why he was having trouble was because of mismatched receivers. One was the FP9, and I forget what the other one was. So I think he was speculating that if you use the same board for that maybe it should not. Yeah.
Well, what he's running, he does not have two RTK receivers. He's got one of these old crappy ones that's only accurate about 10 feet. And then he's got one that the F9P that is RTK and is accurate. So if you go down the very last sentence of this block, he says the moral of the story is don't do this.
Yeah.
So go down to where you see the next big heading pop up.
Yeah.
Okay, go up a couple lines there. And right there he says, moral of the story. Don't ruin a really good answer RTK fix by averaging with a really bad answer 3D fix. So he's saying what everything I just told you is just ignore this because you shouldn't be doing that in the first place.
Okay. And that was because of the mismatch between the two, a good one and a bad and a poor.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So he was trying to use a non-RTK GPS.
Basically, I think he wanted to use that as a fallback, but then he kept saying he was trying to average the two, and that doesn't make any sense to me to average a good one and a bad one because that's just going to make everything worse if you do that. So I didn't look at it real hard. I just saw that he that's what he was doing. He had an RTK and a non-RTK, and I thought, well, that's a bad idea right up front, except for the fact if you lose RTK completely, and that receiver is not giving you decent data, you could at least tell basically where you are by looking at the crappy one.
So now I'm wondering what would cause the RTK to drop out.
Well, one thing that'll happen is if you go under trees or you go next to buildings, and it'll drop back from a fixed solution to a float solution. And if it's obscured enough, it drops back to just a standard 3D solution, which is what his crappy GPS would have been giving him. So it's just a
Okay.
matter of depending where as you drive around, and like I was saying, my correction data from the DOT sometimes just stops coming in, and you lose your high accuracy fix. So that's another reason why.
Okay.
And then as far as like a fallback, we were talking about this before, and Kyler was talking about out planting corn in his field. And basically, if you're driving along and your signal says, I have lost the accurate position, do you want to, the smartest thing is just simply come to a complete stop and sit there and wait for it to come back, and you can start driving again. And then we were also talking about the fact if you're planting corn, you have to have straight rows. If you see something in your way, you don't want to drive around it because that screws up your corn planting if you do that. I suppose you could turn your planter off and drive around and line yourself up and turn it back on and keep driving. But so just more things like that you have to consider. Again,
Okay.
what is your application and what can you live with? And
Mhm. Okay, good. Good to know.
If you're going to put a camera on a Barbie Jeep and drive it around for surveillance, that's
Yeah, I might do that. So
that
the
sounds like
other thing
a
is
place to start.
wife is into bird watching, and we're thinking about putting a garden up north. So I don't know yet.
I'm
I
sure
gotta rethink the whole thing.
the nice quiet Barbie Jeep isn't going to scare the birds off.
No. Uh-uh.
But that's an application if you just want to, as Al says, do a surveillance type thing. As long as you're out, when you plan your path so it's out in the middle. So even if it's off one direction of the arrow, it's not going to hit the house, it's not going to hit the fence or whatever. You just pick
Yeah.
a path right down the middle. Just a crappy this GPS I held up is like a $20 GPS, and it's good enough. Or you can get somehow you can take your cell phone and get the GPS data out of that. So if you have an old cell phone that possibly you don't even, you might be able to do that. You don't even have to have a data plan for it. Take an old one that nobody's using and just make sure the GPS on is turned on. And I assume you can get it out maybe over Bluetooth and maybe over USB. So that'd be another option. And the one in the cell phone, they may have added some extra software. So it at least appears to be more accurate than like this little $20 module I had here. So that's
Okay.
another thing to think about.
So I'd pretty much have to have a dedicated cell phone.
Well, it's you have to put it on when you want to drive it. You have to put the cell phone on there. So that's why I
Yeah.
think if you got an old one nobody's using anymore, you might be able to use that to
Right.
do that with.
Okay.
Well, you have options. I mean,
Yeah.
you need to be able to communicate correction data to the robot. I don't have a cell phone on my robot. I've got those
Well,
The rate.
radios.
So
I-
I wasn't talking about correction data. I mean, actually let your cell phone be the GPS and just spit out its
Oh,
location.
yeah.
So that you don't need anything fancy there, as long as you'd have to look to see, will cell phones do that? I don't know if they will or not.
I ran across one article and I didn't save it, but I think they were, instead of using telemetry radios, they were using LORA radios. Has anybody heard anything about that?
I think what's that company? Reach, the Reach company that puts out stuff. I think they use LoRa to send their correction data back and forth. But keep in mind, LoRa is awfully slow. But when I right here looking on my screen, it says it's running at like 2200 bits per second. So that's not very fast for the correction data that I'm sending. So it would run over that.
Okay.
And right now I'm using LoRa in my remote control, which is this box right here, and it's just got, it's got that little board from Adafruit stuck on there, and it's got the radio, and basically it's an Arduino with a radio on it, and they just hooked up to the switches and joysticks. And so right there, I'm running one LoRa channel, and there was the guy in Wales. He knew Jonathan, and he had like 8 different LoRa radios all running at the same time, I guess, to get enough bandwidth to push all his data through. So apparently you can run more than one at the same time next to each other. You just have to make sure the equivalent of the channels have to be different, and then maybe that would work. So I could probably still have my remote control set up here and then have another module on the thing sending correction data if I wanted to do that.
Oh, okay.
And the LoRa being the name is long range radio or something, saying you can get like a mile, probably without doing anything special. You can probably get like a mile of outside of distance out of the thing. Whereas these telemetry radios, I don't know. I haven't actually tried it to see how far they'll go, and various people have published saying, well, it's got this kind of range, and you don't know if that's really correct or not. So
Okay.
for me, it's just I'm gonna have to experiment and see what I can make it do.
Yeah.
In an open field in Texas, I think I got 500 feet on those cheap radios.
And right a
Yeah.
fan. I was trying to think, well, how far, if I drive all the way around the block like I used to do, I don't know how far, that is, and there's houses in between, so that may or may not be a problem.
Anything else, Bob?
Nope, that's it. Back to the drawing board.
Well, it's all pretty cheap when you just got pencil and paper.
Yeah.
Let's see where. So my, at a high level, my current status is I don't have a path tracking routine that's stable and repeatable. So I've been digging into this underlying algorithm or underlying approach called pure pursuit to try to figure out what I've either my patience or my ability to decipher has exhausted on trying to understand the pure pursuit program that we've been trying to make that Matt used. And I think was written by a LARICS person on GitHub, Larix. So I've been looking at other people and what have they done with pure pursuit. And a long time ago, Kyler mentioned this guy in a script that he wrote that's there. I've been messing around with that script and got it to run effectively the mission that I was trying to run in my backyard, which is to drive straight up, make a Dubin's turn, come back, and repeat that a couple times. So in the process of getting that to work, I've started testing that. In testing that, I did what Jeff told me to do. As typical, I went out and got some yard marking paint and put some specific points in the yard and said, okay, this point, 1.8 and 1.7 on my map, I'm always going to drive to that and see if that's what I'm getting in my GPS data or my lat long data converted to XY coordinates. And there seems to be, a little bit of change in that data. So this is just some testing that I did when I would go to, 1.8 and 1.7 as per the markings in a previous reading. And this morning I went to that same spot and it said, oh, you're at 2.0 and 1.8. So in my type setting, I'm trying to make sure that everybody agrees that I'm at 1.8 and 1.7 before I continue. So I've been working on some code to make it easier to change what is referred to as an origin statement in the whenever you try to convert from lat long to an XY coordinate using this ROS function called LL2XY, you have to give it an origin position. So if I'm getting this data out and I want to get out 1.8 and 1.7, I need to change that origin statement. So anyway, at the moment, I'm trying to make it a little bit easier to change that origin statement. And once I get that done, I'll be able to do more testing. The actual code is this. I mean, I put everything out on GitHub, but here's the actual code that's getting the parameter that I give it and seeing how it compares to 1.8, 1.7. Then it prints, hey, you should change it. And then I'm manually going in and changing that and letting this run. So that's where I'm at the moment. And I put, the actual origin data in my launch file. So again, trying to make it easy to get access to and not hard coded in the program. So I can get out there, I can drive around. I've put some spots on the yard to say always go to these spots, and I'm trying to make it always go to those spots. At the moment, it's not always going to those spots. That's at a high level where I'm at.
How does that spray can work? Is it you push the little thing sideways, or you push in on it, or how does that to get it to squirt paint? What do you gotta?
Yeah, really crappily. Well, at least until I figured it out. Let me go get the can and I'll show you.
I think I recently saw an application doing just what he's doing. I'll have to look it up and I'll post it.
Is that like a sports marking on the lines you're talking about?
Yeah, or marking, trying to determine the path or how accurate it is.
Oh, okay.
It works wonderfully fine. There's a white nozzle on that, but the way they ship
Can,
it,
can you stop your screen sharing?
yeah. Hold on. So the way they ship it is they put this plastic thing over the top of it. The moral of the story is tear that damn thing off. Because until I tore that off, I'm like, well, how does this work? And so you hold the can up and you press in on that white button and the paint's going to come out the working end of that. So it works fine. It works great once
So do
you
you,
tear that plastic thing off the top of it.
so do you push that sideways?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you to make a bracket to put on the back of your vehicle, so you can stick a can in it and put a solenoid on it, so you can have it so it drives around, it gets to a certain spot, and clicks the solenoid, squirts paint on the ground, so it goes to the point you tell it, and it marks it for you. I just wondered how much screwing around that would take to do that, but
Not much. I mean, I don't think my recollection is the amount of pressure, a small servo would probably be enough to
Yeah.
push that. So it
Yeah.
would, I mean, and you could make something that held the can tight, right? It's just a typical paint can.
yeah. So the other option would be just drive your vehicle to the point you want to be, and then just look at the back of it and say, here's the center of the vehicle, and then put your stake in the ground or spray some paint right there or something. So without building any extra contraptions, you could do that.
Now, it does say that its capacity is 800 feet. So
That'll last you a while.
it'll last me a long time, but
So the
Yeah.
things that they use to mark like soccer fields and football fields, does that spray down a liquid, or is that a powder that the thing puts out, or does anybody know?
don't know for sure. In the old days, it was a talc. It was a chalk-like
Yeah.
material, but I think with AstroTurf, it's actually a paint.
I suppose that's something else you can just go to get the what do you call that, a chalk line. You can get just a like a ketchup container full of chalk that you could you squirt that on the ground too, just to if chalk is what you want as opposed to paint. So that'd be another option on that.
By the way, there is actually a company that sells a robotic machine to paint field lines. So you talk about precise, you got to be precise with that, but they've never, in my research, they never disclosed anything about how they were localizing so precisely.
And I thought if I were willing to take my vehicle over to the park and risk them harassing me for doing it, you could just go to one of the baseball fields and put your vehicle at one end of the line and say, this is the one point, and then drive to the other end where their point is, say, here's the next point, and then see if you can drive up and down that line in a straight line and keep it right on that. That would give you a good indication. The other thing is you go to a parking lot like that thing that you were just looking at that Bob was just looking at. That guy was going out in parking lots, and I found that real handy. If you can find an open parking lot somewhere that's already got the lines painted, so you got a nice big long white line, and then you got the cross lines that give you distances too. So that's another handy thing to be able to do if you can find a parking lot that they're not going to kick you out of or arrest you for being a wise guy. You know that's another handy thing to have. That way you don't have to put your own lines down; they're already there. And the other advantage is you go to Google Maps, you could see, you got a picture of it already because it shows you the ground and where the lines are. So that's another way you can map this stuff together. And one parking lot I used to use that a Walmart closed down and they left this nice big open parking lot, but now they've since torn that down and put up apartment buildings there. So I don't have access to that one. There's a couple more around that maybe I could go use them and again do it until somebody harasses me and kicks me out. So it's more things to think about. But the problem with that is, see, if I'm going to go somewhere like to somebody's parking lot, I lose access to my Wi-Fi, so I have to go to like a cell modem to get my correction data, and that's one of the reasons I want to get my phone working. So if I can get that to work, then I can go anywhere as long as you got cell connection there and turn it on and be ready to go. So it's just more options, you know, you have to decide what's the pros and cons of doing any particular thing, and you just have to play around with it.
So that's where I'm at.
I guess I don't have anything else.
Neither do I. Got too much to think about.
Yep.